This is happening right now in Jerusalem. The ancient stones of the old city began to hum with an energy that no one could explain. It started before sunrise on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. The streets went silent. People left their work and looked up at the sky. Even reporters had no words. The first to notice were the early morning pilgrims walking the Via Dolorosa. Sarah, a grandmother from Ohio, who had saved for 20 years to make this trip, stopped mid-prayer when she felt the ground beneath her feet vibrate with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. It wasn't an earthquake, she would later tell anyone who would listen. It was like the earth itself was waking up. The mainstream media isn't covering this. They don't want you to see what's really happening. But the truth can't stay hidden forever. You're watching this because God wanted you to see it. Something in your spirit recognizes this moment as different. By 6 a.m., the Western Wall Plaza was filling with people who couldn't explain why they felt compelled to be there. Rabbi Moshe Goldstein, who had been studying Torah since before dawn, looked up from his ancient texts to see hundreds of people streaming through the gates. In 40 years of ministry, he whispered to his colleague, "I've never seen anything like this. They're coming from everywhere. The same soil where prophets walked, the same streets that heard the Messiah's footsteps." The dome of the rock glowed gold beneath a clear sky that seemed more brilliant than any morning in recent memory. Synagogues, churches, and mosques all stood in silence, their faithful drawn to something greater than their individual prayers. A sound began to emerge from the gathering crowd, not shouting or celebration, but a unified humming, as if thousands of voices were finding the same frequency without coordination. Children stopped crying. Traffic seemed to move with unusual calm. Even the vendors in the marketplace found themselves speaking in hushed, reverent tones. "I felt like I was being called home," said David, a young father from Canada who had been visiting the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. "Not to my earthly home, but to something I'd been searching for my entire life without knowing it." The phenomenon spread beyond the old city walls. In West Jerusalem, people reported feeling an inexplicable pull toward the Temple Mount area. Construction workers put down their tools. Students left their universities. Business meetings were quietly postponed as executives found themselves driving toward the ancient heart of the city. This isn't hysteria. This is prophecy in motion. What the prophets saw thousands of years ago is unfolding before our eyes. Zechariah 8:23 declares, "In those days 10 men from every language of the nations shall grasp the sleeve of a Jewish man, saying, 'Let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you.'" And in Acts 2:5 we read, "And there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven." My friend, can you feel this in your spirit? Do you realize we are witnessing what generations only dreamed of? The veil between heaven and earth is getting thinner. This is the preview of the greatest event in human history. As the morning progressed, the gathering grew from hundreds to thousands, people from every continent, speaking dozens of languages, all drawn by the same inexplicable calling. The Israeli authorities, initially concerned about crowd control, found themselves witnessing something that defied all their training and protocols. Are we prepared for protests, for conflict, for the usual tensions? Admitted Captain Rachel Cohen of the Jerusalem Police. We never prepared for peace, for unity, for whatever this is. Today, something impossible appeared over the Temple Mount. The second day brought revelations that would shake the foundations of everything the world thought it knew about Jerusalem. As dawn broke, the sky above the Temple Mount began to shimmer with a light that cameras couldn't quite capture and scientists couldn't explain. They heard a sound, not thunder, but a voice within the storm. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a seismologist from Madrid who had come to study the unusual ground vibrations, found her instruments registering frequencies that shouldn't exist in nature. The readings show patterns that mirror ancient Hebrew musical scales, she reported to her colleagues back in Spain. It's as if the earth itself is singing in Hebrew. The gathering had grown overnight. Where thousands had come on the first day, tens of thousands now filled every available space around the Temple Mount. What amazed the authorities most was the complete absence of conflict. Jews, Christians, Muslims, and people of no particular faith all stood together in respectful silence, each seeming to understand that they were witnessing something beyond human comprehension. An old merchant named Hassan, who had sold souvenirs near the Damascus Gate for 60 years, said, "I've waited my entire life for this. My grandfather told me stories of when the presence of the Almighty would return to Jerusalem. I always believed, but I never thought I would live to see it." The phenomenon wasn't limited to the faithful. Dr. James Mitchell, a quantum physicist from Oxford who described himself as aggressively secular, had flown to Jerusalem to debunk what he assumed were mass hysteria reports. Instead, he found himself standing in the crowd at 3 a.m., tears streaming down his face. "There are forces at work here that science hasn't discovered yet," he admitted in a video call to his university. "I can't explain it, but I can't deny what I'm experiencing." God is moving the pieces of the end times. What happened on that first morning was just the beginning. By the second evening, reports were coming in from around the world of similar gatherings forming near significant religious sites. In Rome, people were drawn to St. Peter's Basilica. In Mecca, pilgrims reported feeling an unusual sense of unity. In Athens, crowds gathered at ancient temples that hadn't seen worship in millennia. But Jerusalem remained the center, the epicenter of something that was reshaping humanity's understanding of faith, purpose, and destiny. Rabbi Sarah Friedman, one of Jerusalem's most respected religious scholars, addressed the growing crowd. The Talmud speaks of the days when the nations will stream to Jerusalem like rivers flowing to the sea. We are not watching the end of the world. We are watching its transformation. A pilgrim from Australia, standing near the Lion's Gate, said, "I felt the heavens touch the earth. I've been a Christian for 30 years, but I've never felt God's presence like this. It's not just in my heart anymore. It's in the very air I breathe." The media began to take notice, though their reports couldn't capture the spiritual dimension of what was occurring. CNN showed aerial footage of the massive crowds. BBC interviewed confused government officials, but none of them could explain why people were leaving their homes, their jobs, their responsibilities to travel to Jerusalem. "It's not religious fanaticism," explained Dr. Miriam Rosen, a psychiatrist who had come to study the psychological aspects of the gathering. "These people are from every walk of life, every education level, every culture. The only thing they have in common is this sense of being called to be here." As night fell on the second day, the crowd didn't disperse. Instead, they began to organize themselves naturally into what could only be described as a massive outdoor prayer meeting. No one was leading it. No denomination was organizing it. It simply emerged from the collective spirit of the gathered multitude. Isaiah 2:2-3 came alive before their eyes. "Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Many people shall come and say, 'Come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord.'" Jerusalem stopped this morning for a reason no one can explain. The third day brought the event that would be remembered for generations. At exactly 12 noon, as the sun reached its zenith over the Temple Mount, the shimmering light that had been growing stronger each day suddenly condensed into what witnesses could only describe as a column of fire and cloud. The ancient stones of the old city seemed to respond to this manifestation, glowing with a warmth that had nothing to do with the Mediterranean sun. Every person in the vast crowd, now numbering in the hundreds of thousands, fell silent simultaneously, as if responding to an unheard conductor. Then came the voice. It wasn't heard with human ears, but felt in the depths of every soul present. In Hebrew, in Arabic, in English, in Mandarin, somehow, each person heard it in their own language, while knowing that everyone else was hearing the same words. Prepare the way. The time of restoration has begun. Dr. Sarah Blackwood, a linguistics professor from Cambridge who had arrived to study the multilingual phenomenon, found herself on her knees despite a lifetime of academic skepticism. "I've studied ancient languages for 25 years, she would later testify. I know the difference between psychological suggestion and genuine communication. This was communication from a source beyond our understanding." The rabbis who had been quietly observing the gathering suddenly began to weep. Rabbi David Stern, whose family had maintained traditions in Jerusalem for 8 generations, addressed the crowd. "The prophetic time has begun. What our ancestors wrote about, what they dreamed about, what they died believing, it's happening now." But this wasn't just a Jewish moment. Father Michael O'Brien, an Irish Catholic priest who had come to Jerusalem on pilgrimage, found himself standing next to Imam Abdullah Hassan from Pakistan. Both men reported feeling the same overwhelming sense of divine presence. "We served the same God with different names," Father O'Brien said. "Today, we heard his voice together." The manifestation lasted for 7 minutes. During that time, reported healings occurred throughout the crowd. Maria Santos, a paraplegic woman from Brazil who had come to Jerusalem in a wheelchair, stood up and walked. Ahmed al-Rashid, a blind Syrian refugee, began to see. These weren't isolated incidents. Dozens of miraculous healings were documented by the international medical team that had assembled to study the phenomenon. Dr. Rachel Goldman, an emergency physician from Tel Aviv, established a triage station expecting to treat crowd-related injuries. Instead, she found herself documenting recoveries that contradicted everything she knew about medicine. "I've seen cancer scans from before and after," she reported to the Israeli Medical Association. "Terminal diagnoses becoming clean bills of health. It's medically impossible, but it's happening." The voice spoke again, and this time its message was specific. "The path to the third temple shall be opened not through human hands, but through human hearts prepared for my dwelling." Ancient prophecies suddenly made sense in ways they never had before. Joel 2:32 proclaimed, "And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be deliverance." Revelation 7:9 described a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne. The political implications were staggering. World leaders who had spent decades trying to broker peace in the Middle East watched in amazement as ancient enemies embraced in the shadow of the Temple Mount. Palestinian and Israeli mothers prayed together. Syrian refugees shared food with Jewish settlers. Kurdish activists sat in peaceful dialogue with Turkish diplomats. "This changes everything," admitted Secretary of State Jennifer Walsh in an emergency session with the UN Security Council. "Every peace plan we've ever proposed has been based on dividing Jerusalem. We never considered the possibility of unifying the world around it." As evening approached, the crowd began to organize itself into what could only be described as a living temple. Groups formed naturally around prayer, study, and service. Food appeared as if from nowhere, donated by local businesses, international relief organizations, and individuals who felt compelled to contribute. The Israeli government, initially concerned about crowd control and security, found themselves providing infrastructure for what was becoming a spontaneous city of faith. "We're not managing a crisis," admitted Prime Minister David Roth. "We're facilitating a miracle. My friend, can you feel this in your spirit? While the world sleeps, God is calling those who are awake." The third temple was never going to be built with stones and mortar. It was always meant to be built with hearts unified in worship of the one true God. And when I tell you why, you'll understand what's truly unfolding. The fourth day revealed mysteries that had been hidden beneath Jerusalem for thousands of years. As the crowd maintained their vigil around the Temple Mount, a group of archaeologists working in the city of David made a discovery that would rewrite history books and confirm ancient prophecies. Dr. Benjamin Roth, whose team had been excavating ritual baths from the Second Temple period, broke through what they thought was another ancient wall. Instead, they found themselves standing in a vast underground chamber that predated any known construction in Jerusalem. The walls were covered with inscriptions in Hebrew, Aramaic, and languages that scholars couldn't immediately identify. The carbon dating is impossible, Dr. Roth reported to the Israel Antiquities Authority. The chamber shows signs of continuous use spanning 3,000 years, but it was sealed with stones that show no tool marks from any known ancient construction techniques. The most remarkable discovery was a series of golden plates, inscribed with text that seemed to pulse with the same energy that had been manifesting above ground. Rabbi Goldstein, now recognized as one of the spiritual leaders of the gathering, was called to examine the writings. His translation sent shockwaves through the religious and academic communities. When the nations gather as one voice in Zion, the hidden foundation of the eternal temple shall be revealed. What was lost in exile shall be restored in unity. The chamber appeared to extend beneath the Temple Mount itself, connected by tunnels that had been sealed for centuries. More remarkably, the architectural plans carved into the chamber walls showed the exact specifications for a temple that differed significantly from both Solomon's and Herod's temples, yet matched descriptions found in Ezekiel's prophecies with perfect precision. "This isn't just an archaeological find," explained Dr. Roth. "This is the divine blueprint that the prophets saw in vision. It's been here all along, waiting for the right time to be revealed." The discovery couldn't have come at a more significant moment. The crowd above ground had now organized itself into the most diverse and peaceful religious gathering in human history. Representatives from every major faith tradition were present, not as tourists or diplomats, but as pilgrims drawn by something beyond political or religious boundaries. Cardinal Francesco Romano, representing the Vatican, stood beside Grand Mufti Hassan al-Baghdadi from Egypt and Chief Rabbi Jonathan Goldberg from London. Together, they issued a joint statement that stunned the world. "We have witnessed the presence of the Almighty in a way that transcends our individual traditions. We call upon all people of faith to recognize that the God we worship is one, and his house shall be a house of prayer for all nations." The underground discovery revealed something even more extraordinary. The chamber contained not just architectural plans, but detailed instructions for conducting worship that incorporated elements from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, yet predated the establishment of any of these as separate religions. Professor Elizabeth Carter, a comparative religion scholar from Harvard, studied the inscriptions with growing amazement. These texts describe worship practices that honor the traditions of Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad as part of a single, unified revelation. It's as if the ancient designers anticipated the divisions that would come and prepared a solution. The political ramifications were immediate and profound. The Palestinian Authority, the Israeli government, the Jordanian Waqf, and the Vatican announced the formation of an unprecedented interfaith council to oversee the development of what was being called the Universal Temple, a worship space that would welcome all of Abraham's children. For 70 years, politicians have tried to divide Jerusalem, announced President Sarah Mitchell of the United States during an emergency address to the nation. Instead, we're witnessing its role as the center of human unity. Our foreign policy must adapt to this new reality. The crowd continued to grow, but so did the infrastructure to support them. Temporary shelters appeared overnight, donated by international relief organizations. Medical stations operated around the clock, staffed by volunteers from every continent. Food distribution centers emerged organically, supplied by donations that poured in from around the world. Most remarkably, crime virtually disappeared from Jerusalem. Police reported that they had nothing to do except provide traffic control and assistance to the millions of pilgrims. "It's like the city has been sanctified," observed Chief Inspector David Levy. "People aren't just behaving better, they seem to have become better." Ezekiel 37:27-28 was being fulfilled before the world's eyes. "My tabernacle also shall be with them. Indeed, I will be their God, and they shall be my people. The nations also will know that I, the Lord, sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary is in their midst forevermore." The ancient doors that had been sealed beneath Jerusalem were opening, but they were opening hearts as well as historical chambers. The path to the Third Temple was being prepared not through political negotiation or military conquest, but through the transformation of human souls united in worship of the one true God. Are you ready for what comes next? What happened today stopped a city, but what's coming will stop the entire world. Now that you know this, what will you do about it? The fifth day brought the culmination of events that had begun with a mysterious humming in the ancient stones of Jerusalem. As dawn broke over the Temple Mount, the golden dome began to glow with an inner light that was visible from space. Satellite images showed a pillar of luminescence extending from Jerusalem into the heavens, confirming to the world that something unprecedented was occurring in the holy city. The crowd, now numbering over 2 million people from every nation on earth, began to move in perfect coordination despite having no central leadership. They formed concentric circles around the Temple Mount, creating a living mandala of humanity united in purpose. Each circle represented different faith traditions, yet all moved in harmony toward the same center. Rabbi Goldstein, Father O'Brien, Imam Hassan, and spiritual leaders from Buddhism, Hinduism, and indigenous traditions stood together at the center of the gathering. In their hands were the golden plates discovered in the underground chamber, now glowing with the same light that illuminated the dome above. The text on the plates had been fully translated, revealing instructions for a form of worship that honored every authentic path to the divine, while maintaining the purity of monotheistic faith. "The house of prayer for all nations," declared Rabbi Goldstein, reading from the ancient inscription, "shall unite heaven and earth through the unity of human hearts." As the spiritual leaders began to read from the plates in unison, something extraordinary occurred. The barriers between the different sections of the Temple Mount, barriers that had stood for centuries as symbols of division, began to dissolve, not physically, but spiritually. People found themselves able to move freely between areas that had been restricted, yet they did so with such reverence that not a single incident of conflict was reported. "The walls are still there," observed Dr. Miriam Rosen, the psychiatrist who had been studying the psychological aspects of the gathering. "But somehow, they don't matter anymore. People respect the boundaries while transcending them. It's as if they're seeing with different eyes." The international response was swift and unprecedented. The United Nations convened an emergency session, not to address a crisis, but to recognize what Secretary General Maria Santos called the emergence of a new paradigm for human cooperation. World leaders who had been enemies for decades found themselves calling each other to discuss their shared experience of witnessing the divine through global media coverage. President Chen Wei of China, in a speech that stunned his own government, announced, "The People's Republic recognizes that there are realities beyond material existence. We pledge our support to the Jerusalem Initiative as a model for global peace." President Vladimir Petrov of Russia, historically opposed to Western influence in the Middle East, shocked the world by declaring, "Russia offers full support to whatever emerges from Jerusalem. We have witnessed the hand of God, and we will not stand in its way." The economic impact was as remarkable as the spiritual transformation. Stock markets, instead of crashing due to uncertainty, soared as investors recognized the potential for a world without religious conflict. Defense contractors found their stock prices plummeting, while companies focused on infrastructure, education, and humanitarian aid saw unprecedented growth. When the threat of religious war disappears, explained economist Dr. James Patterson, trillions of dollars are freed up for constructive purposes. We're looking at the potential for global prosperity beyond anything in human history. The underground chamber beneath the Temple Mount had been fully excavated, revealing a complex that could accommodate worship for millions of people. The architecture defied conventional engineering. Chambers that should have collapsed under the weight of the mountain above remained perfectly intact, supported by principles that modern science was only beginning to understand. Construction crews from around the world volunteered their services to create access to the underground temple. Jewish builders worked alongside Palestinian craftsmen. Christian architects collaborated with Muslim engineers. Buddhist monks blessed the foundation stones alongside Sikh community leaders. "This isn't construction," marveled foreman Giuseppe Romano from Italy. "This is restoration. It's like the building is completing itself through our hands." On the evening of the 5th day, as the sun set over Jerusalem, the massive crowd began to sing, not in one language, but in all languages simultaneously. The harmony was perfect, the rhythm universal, the melody ancient yet new. Video footage of the event went viral across every social media platform, inspiring similar gatherings in major cities around the world. In New York, London, Tokyo, São Paulo, and Cairo, millions of people gathered in public squares to join their voices with Jerusalem. The song they sang had never been taught, yet everyone seemed to know it. Linguists identified elements from Hebrew psalms, Gregorian chants, Islamic nasheeds, Buddhist mantras, and folk songs from every culture on earth. The barriers between sacred and secular, between religious and universal, have dissolved, observed Dr. Elizabeth Carter. We're witnessing the birth of a truly global spiritual community while maintaining respect for individual traditions. As night fell over Jerusalem, the lights of the city were no longer needed. The glow from the Temple Mount illuminated the entire region, visible from neighboring countries. Pilots reported that the light was warm and welcoming, not blinding or harsh. It was the light of home. The prophecies of Isaiah were being fulfilled. "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and deep darkness the people. But the Lord will arise over you, and his glory will be seen upon you. The Gentiles shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising." My friend, we are not watching the end of the world. We are watching its transformation. The third temple was never meant to be a building that excluded. It was always meant to be a beacon that included, a house of prayer for all nations, where the knowledge of the Lord covers the earth as the waters cover the sea. What happened in Jerusalem stopped the world, but what's beginning will remake it. The ancient promise is being fulfilled. "They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." The prophetic time has begun. The third temple path has opened not through human division, but through divine unity, and every soul that recognizes this moment as holy becomes a living stone in the temple that will stand forever. Now that you know this, what will you do about it? Are you ready for what comes next? Until then, stay ready, stay faithful. Maranatha, the New Jerusalem has begun to rise.